Hello everyone, hello and welcome. Welcome to the start of our day here on Adobe Live. Welcome everyone into the chat here on Behance. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for hanging with me here this morning for the next hour and a half. We will be making some stuff in Adobe After Effects from scenes that were generated in Adobe Illustrator. So if you are new to After Effects, if you are new to some of these processes, don't worry, this is for you. This is a beginner focus, getting started, getting your feet wet kind of thing to start your day off here on Adobe Live. I'm Evan Abrams. I'm a motion designer and spend a lot of my time teaching people how to do After Effects. You can find me around the internet at EC Abrams on YouTube, on Twitter, and all those places. But today I'm just here to have a chill hang and to help you with some of your things. If you are watching this on YouTube currently, please come over and join us on behance.net/live. This is where all the chat is going. This is where I'll be able to see your questions. Speaking of, if you have any questions throughout this process, I would love it if you just let me know in the chat. I want to help you out as best I can. We can go slow. We'll take it one step at a time. It's going to be great. And of course, good people of the chat, I'd love to know what you're doing, where you're from, and specifically what you're looking to do in Motion, in After Effects, in the Adobe ecosystem of apps. Speaking of things you could be doing, we've got a rich full day of activities here. We've got so many things going on. So after I'm done showing you how to animate a scene today, we are going to jump into a Photoshop Creative Challenge after that. And then we're going to have some hand lettering going on. I think that's in Adobe Fresco. So it's a very cool app. You're going to love that. Then we've got an Illustrator Daily Challenge. Then we've got some mobile app design. And then you've got your XD Daily Challenge. And finally, we're going to wrap up the day with some doodle therapy. So if you want to just chill out, have a draw your stress away, please hang out with us for that. And of course, we are back again tomorrow because I am just going to be dealing with some day one stuff here. So today, what is our goal? What are we working towards? What are we going to create here together? Well, in short, let's have a little look at my screen and I'll give you a preview of the direction we're going. And of course, so great to see so many people in the stream. Sean's been hanging out early here with me, and Ann right in the stream, and just simply Ann, one letter will do. Christy Jackson, good to see you. Tim Mobest, our moderator, as usual, holding it down on the boards. You can tell by that little shield next to him that he's not to be trifled with. And then we've got Mallory, Lamont. Oh, so good to see Jay in here. Mercurial Forte, good to see you in here. And yeah, always let me know who you are, where you're from, and what you're doing. So let's get into it. Let's have a look at the screen and see where we're going. So we're gonna have a peruse here. We are gonna do some excellent stuff here. We're gonna be working in Adobe After Effects. It's gonna be fun. So here's what we're driving towards. We are going to be creating this kind of deep, a little bit of parallax in here scene. Hopefully we can animate that logo at some point. But the main thing we're going to be doing is starting from Illustrator artwork, and we're going to try to move it all into After Effects, push it around in 3D space, move a camera through it, get some of the layers moving and interacting in interesting ways. So if you've never opened up After Effects before, don't worry, I'm here for you. We're going to be fine. We're going to take it one step at a time. But our journey actually begins way back. We're going to have to go all the way back now. So it's going to be great. So here we go. And Dorina, we won't be doing any character stuff today. It's a bit of a advanced move, a bit further down the line. When we start getting into more advanced stuff, definitely check out some other things. But today we're keeping it flat, keeping it regular, so that we can all kind of get started in this stuff. So where does our journey begin, though? Let's do that. I made some notes so that I don't forget. what we need to talk about today. Our journey actually began here on Adobe Stock. Now, we're going to be dealing with stock elements, so we're going to be using scenes that were created by somebody else. A lot of motion design actually happens further down the process. So we are going to be working with elements that someone else has created, or we're going to be working with elements that have already been pre-produced for us to work with, and they might be coming from a print format. They might be coming from a digital format. We might be animating assets originally created for web. Ooh, just smashing the mic around this morning. But this is what we're going to start with. Okay, so I've already gone ahead and downloaded it. If you want to get your hands on that, you can really just Google mountain landscape, or just search Adobe Stock for mountain landscape, and you'll find it in there. But I can drop a link to it in the chat if people are interested. Oh, no, that's way too many characters for the chat. I won't be doing that. So anyway, from there, I go ahead and I open that up in Illustrator. And they've lovingly included 4 different scenes, and we're only interested in this one up here. So the first thing to do is to start to break things apart. That's the first move. And Reverb Mike, you're right. We're going to be dealing with these happy little trees. If you want some more trees in your scene, you just go ahead and you put them right in. And I love nature. I love the mountains. If anyone on here is familiar with Ian Robinson, you've probably heard his voice if you've listened to some of the tutorials on the Adobe Learn platform. Ian Robinson lives up in the mountains, and he's often posting to his Instagram. Very jealous of his lifestyle. But for us, this vector artwork is going to work out perfectly. So I'm going to start by taking these things, and I'm going to ungroup them. So you can ungroup them this way. Command-Shift-G will also ungroup things. But let's not ungroup too much. If you can see down in the corner, here, what you've got is these various groups. So when I've ungrouped this, we've now released all of these rectangles, so I can just select and delete some of those away. So I'm going to take this thing and I'm going to move it into the middle center of my artboard. And right now everything's really contained, right? So in this area, what we want to do is now ungroup this stuff. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to ungroup that again. And if you can see over here in the layers, these groups have now kind of broken apart. What do we have as groups? Well, this logo is a group. And then these trees, it looks like these trees are another group. And then we have the mountains, and then finally the sky in the background. So what I want to do is to break these things out into individual layers, because eventually we are going to be dealing with things. We want to compartmentalize, we want to get things grouped together, but first we need to break them all apart so that we can move them all around independently of each other. Now, there are various plugins like Overlord that can do that. We're going to keep it vanilla today. We're going to just work with what you've got, okay? So what we got here, how do we break these apart effectively? We could just start creating more layers. So I'm going to make a layer. You can double click on it, and we're going to name this the logo, right? And then you can select here and drag its little red box up to the logo zone. And whenever I separate things apart, I like to try to do it from the foreground back, turning off the layers as I go. So I turn that off because I know I've got that logo locked down. Then we've got these trees. So I'm going to make a layer for the trees. And again, we're dragging this little box up here, and this is the trees layer. Okay, good. We don't need to look at that anymore. Let's create a new one. And this is going to be for the hills here. These hills have, I was going to say hills have eyes, but that would be very creepy. So we're going to just move the hills up like this. And this back layer, we're going to rename this to the sky. Okay. But we have further breaking down to go. Oh, and thank you so much, Tim, for dropping that idea in the chat. Tim is always looking out, for other people out here. So it's great. And yes, this logo does a great job of telling us we are indeed looking at mountains. So we need to break these things apart even further, and I want to get the trees to be individual from each other. So let's look at only the trees. And they're also stuck in this weird box. What's going on with that? Why are they stuck in this box? Well, this is a clipping group. So here, let me just drag this out a little bit so you can kind of see how everything is named. So all of these things are being bound inside this box, this clipping box. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to release the clipping mask. I release you from the clipping mask, which will give me, all of these things now removed from their original containers. And you can see that we have so much more tree to work with now. And that is pretty essential when we're going to be doing things like moving a camera through a scene or animating a scene. You want to have more than you think. So we don't just need that tiny cropped amount of the trees. We need all of the trees. We want to see both sides of the tree. We don't care about the frame because we're going to reframe this whole thing anyway. We're not going to be working in this frame size. We might be exporting this into a square or a vertical or a standard 16:9 kind of frame. So you want to make sure that you have the maximum amount of the assets possible that you might use. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and delete that rectangle. We don't need that. Now here is a little life hack for you. When we were separating those things out to layers, I had to make the layers manually and then move things into them. Well, you don't really need to do that, right? So you can go up here to this little menu, and hopefully you can see my mouse over at the side of the screen. Maybe it's not totally clear, but you click on it, and then we can release these layers and to create a sequence. We're going to say, so I'm going to say release, and now I've created all these sub layers of that original layer. I'm going to grab those and move them up like so. So this original tree layer is now empty. Oh no, I just deleted everything. Don't do that. So I'm going to take this tree layer here. I'm going to hit the garbage can and delete that because now I have these tree layers, right? I've separated the trees out. And what you want to do, layer 5 is not a very good name. So instead, we are going to make sure that we name these appropriately. And I want to make sure that these things are moved in such a way that the layer order reflects where I expect them to be in terms of closeness. So the logo is the closest thing to me. Then I want this tree to be the next closest thing to me. So I'm going to move that up in the order. And let's call this tree A, perhaps. And then this one here feels like it's the next closest to me. So that one, oh yes, here we are. It's tree B. Good, good, good. And as you name them, you can make them go away. You can turn their eyes off so that you don't have to see that. And now we're going to move into this one here. What's this one? Who needs to be next? I think, is this one the next one, perhaps? And we're just we want to get them into a good order and rename them, right? So that's what we want to be doing. Now, we have an excellent question from Reverb Mike. Why not just copy the paths and paste them into After Effects? So there are a few reasons why I shan't be doing that this time. Usually that's a very good method to get into. One, these are very complex paths. These are very complex compound paths that we have here. Sometimes copying and pasting them doesn't work super well. Even with wonderful third-party plugins like Overlord, they can sometimes make mistakes. However, let me just finish up the tree C, tree D. Oh, good boy. This is my A, B, C, D, E. There we go. But the real reason, the more compelling reason that I want to do this comes down to these clouds, these mountains, this situation over here now. These, again, we are going to want to ungroup them so that we can separate them out into their individual hills, right? And now we have these individual mountains, but look at this. There's no clipping mask to release here. These are just simply stop. The paths simply stop. But the other thing about them is that they have fairly complex gradients on them as well. So as you can see, it's a 3-color gradient running from this color to this color to this color, these knots going through. We also have these interesting little mesh warped, these little doers, as Bob Ross would say, these little mesh warped clouds out here, these fog banks. And some of these nuances could get lost when we start copying and pasting between the two apps. And what I want to do is kind of show more purely how we can set this up and then simply save it and then import the .ai into After Effects. And all of this will be preserved for us. This will all be preserved for us so that we can enjoy manipulating it without touching the paths. If I knew if I thought in the future I was planning to manipulate some of these paths in After Effects, I would certainly bring them in, because I would want to have access to the points and to change them around. But this is a very similar method that you could use if you were breaking down Photoshop layers. So it's a little bit more universal, I would say. So that's kind of the why of my methods today. And hello, Umacorn, good to see you in the chat. Hello. Shout out to all my weekend A-team hanging out. I stream a bit on weekends, so we get to hang out here on a weekday. It's a little wild. And yeah, this is an interesting gradient going on. I love what I'm seeing here. However, we've pushed the trees to different layers, and now we've come to the first kind of caveat that I want to dip into. This is not the screen ratio we're going to deal with. And in particular, just with the trees, I was so happy to see that there's extra tree, right? There's tree beyond the edges, so that if we start moving left to right, forward, backward, when we're animating and playing in the scene, the trees will look totally normal. They're going to be fine. However, these mountains, these hills, will not. So let me first break these out into their individual layers. So again, just to show you that again, we're going to release them to layers. So what are we doing? We are selecting here. So we click next to the dot right on the little edge of the screen. That selects everything that's hanging out on this layer. Then we go here to the little hamburger menu and we say release to layers, sequence, which will create all of these lovely layers. We can now move them up and out of that initial layer. And now we have access to all of these as individual layers. So we might name them things like Fog 1. We might name this Fog 2. You could name these all kinds of things as you wish. But more importantly now, I want to make sure that I have enough mountain to move these around and to move through them and to really enjoy the space. So in here, if I hit A, while I have something selected, I'm going to call up the points, the direct select tool. Or you can go ahead, just so I can see, I just kind of wanted to see all the little points. I want to get a look at their anchors. And I need to create a little bit more mountain. I need to take a little artistic license and extend the scene. Now, what's lovely about vector graphics like this is really I can just grab my pen tool. I'm going to click out here just to add some points along this edge. That's fun. And then I'm just going to use my direct select tool and grab by hitting A, grab this point, hold down shift, grrr, and move it out to the edge of the page here. I'm going to move it all the way out to the edge. And then I'm simply going to try to move these points into a rough approximation of what I think the rest of the mountain might look like. Now you'll notice that I'm not doing a particularly careful job of it. Now, that's because, one, we're a little bit tight for time, and the other reason that we shan't be doing too much else is that they won't be the focus. These are going to be a little bit off to the sides. You don't really need to be as careful with them. And Reverb Mike, you've got a great suggestion that you could duplicate and reflect. Right? You could just take this thing. You could create a new one, and we could flip it. We could transform. We could reflect. Wonderful, we've done it. And then we can just kind of snap it in down here. So if you wanted, for example, this to be kind of a duplicate, perfectly good. I prefer in this case to extend this because I'm really interested in sort of creating a little bit more verisimilitude. Like if this hill was about to start going up into another hill, maybe that's the journey that it's on. It can be useful to kind of extend these landscapes out to try to make this stuff work. Okpa, thanks for coming out. Glad. Hopefully this is enjoyable. Hopefully this is good. There are also a bunch of effects we can use in After Effects to help extend clips out, to extend these objects beyond where they're at. But sometimes there are little hiccups, little bugaboos that we may not we may not anticipate for. And so I like to just take a little moment, refine what I can in Illustrator before we kind of move on. Speaking of, there's one more thing that I want to check out while I'm in here. Critically, I don't want anything to get cut off outside of this artboard. Using this method that we're doing, we want to make sure that everything in here is just inside the bounds of the artboard. All of all the arms and legs are inside the vehicle before we go on the trip, so we're not having anything dangerous happen to us. Okay, and you might think, well, don't I need to have everything kind of centered? Well, we can recenter and move everything else around as we like later on. And in particular, one thing I'm very interested in doing, just to double check our work, always good to double check our work, is I'm going to create a rectangle here, and I'm going to make it 1920 by 1080 pixels, because I know that is the size and shape of our eventual screen size. So I'm going to plop this out here, not on this layer though. No. This will have to go above everything else just to check, just to see what the frame is looking like, right? So if I just have a nice frame here, I could use a very thick stroke on it. I could use like a garish pink color. And so I can see kind of what 16 by 9 as a ratio is going to look like out here. So now you can start to kind of crop in and to try to understand, what is it going to look like when I actually start moving around and doing things in After Effects. Before we even open up that program, we're able to make a lot of choices about planning ahead and understanding, okay, I might need to move this around, and this much of the mountains is not really going to be seen that much, so I don't need to worry about it too much. And don't worry, like any good cooking show, I have already gone ahead and and made one before. So if I just go ahead and open up here, here's one I've prepared earlier. So this is kind of the intermediate step, and here is where I sort of wanted to be driving towards, right? Is to have the mountains, have everything kind of set up the way I want, everything labeled the way I'd like, so that I'm now able to bring it into After Effects. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense of what you're doing, and make sure that when you go ahead and you save this, you're probably going to want to make sure you turn on maximum compatibility when you do so. So that's enough time in Illustrator. Once you've got everything separated and extended and everything is feeling good and you think you can frame it up, and certainly we can play with things inside of After Effects, but I'm trying to reduce how much stuff we have to do in there. Oh, Sean, I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to remember Martha Stewart isms. I haven't seen her in a while on the television. I know she's friends with Snoop, and so that means she's probably a cool person. So I'm going to go ahead and close down Illustrator because we are moving on. We're going to move on. We're going to take that dive into After Effects. We're going there. Oh boy, don't worry about it. It'll be fine. We're gonna be good. And like I said, this is where we're driving towards. This is where we're trying to get to. Now, granted, I will grant you, all of these layers, this might be intimidating. Okay, and it's okay. I'm just here to tell you, don't worry. I'm here with you. I'm here with you. All of this will be fine. All of this will make sense in a moment. So, first thing we're going to do, we are going to import our friend. We're going to import our buddy, the Blue Mountains, the version that I worked up beforehand. And in particular, pay attention here, we're going to import as footage. No. We're going to import as a composition retaining the layer sizes. And what's critical in here is that you want to retain these layer sizes so that things are layer relative. Now, you could make things frame relative, but let's leave them this way because it's going to make a little bit more sense when we start playing around and moving things and manipulating them. So I hope that's going to be good for all of us. Okay. And I'm going to ask it to create a composition when it comes in. So I'm going to head and I'm going to hit open. It's going to think for a little bit. And now it has created blue mountains for me. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to close down my day one example because we're kind of starting over from scratch. We're going to open up the blue mountains example. And oh boy, would you look at that, one for one. It is exactly the kind of garbled mess that I left when I got out of Illustrator. Now we're here. Now we have to make the best of what we have. Okay, so I went ahead and I also broke down this top logo a bit more. So I broke this down into its constituent parts. So what I'm going to do now that we have arrived here in After Effects, I'm getting tongue-tied this morning. So here in After Effects, I'm going to start doing pre-compositions. So I'm going to go Command or Control Shift C, which brings up my pre-compose dialog, because I need to start grouping and containing things. Now, these things here in this mountains logo that tells us pretty distinctly that this is just mountains. Great. I don't know which is. And what's going to be interesting here is that when we pre-compose this, we're going to take these individual elements, stick them together. This is kind of like grouping. You know, this kind of does the same thing as grouping. It's a little bit different, but it's going to help us contain this. And I'm going to call this the, very obvious logo. We're going to move all of the attributes, which is the only option we have when we are selecting many things, and adjust duration to the span of the selected layers. We don't really need to do that because they are as long as this comp, but just know that if these layers were kind of shorter and we wanted the comp they live in to be shorter, we could do that, or longer. You know, we've got that going on. And then I'm going to click open the new composition. So when we make the pre-comp, open it up, let's see what's going on in there. Okay, so I'm going to hit OK. And wouldn't you know it, it has created something that is the exact same frame size and duration as the previous thing. And we've got our little mountain logo up here. Now, when working with this, I don't think that's really where we want these things to live. So what I'm going to do is call it my proportion grid. Now, proportion grid you can call up right here. And then we're going to move everything down. Now, we've got a question in the chat that is interesting. Doria is saying, sometimes when I import it as a composition retaining layer size, all the layers appear stacked on top of each other at the center of the screen instead of how they are in the AI file. Well, that's very interesting. That's very interesting. So that could be down. Is there another checkbox that you might want to look into? There are sometimes little issues that can happen, and some of those might be down. I would recommend checking to see what happens when you bring it in with retaining layer sizes. Sunny is asking what was the difference between the two options in that pre-comp dialog box. We'll dip into that in a bit, but I would recommend just making sure that there aren't any strange checkboxes going on, and things should not move though. So if it is something that's easily replicable, I would definitely check out Adobe support. The good people on the Adobe support forums, I think, are very helpful and can usually get you where you want to go with these kinds of. When the program behaves in a way that it shouldn't behave, I would recommend definitely checking those out. It is often I find any problem that I've had, someone else has had already, and someone's already got a solution on it. So I would definitely recommend checking that out. But Sunny, you were asking about pre-comping. Now, the difference between the two is we are pre-comping, but where will the attributes be moving? Now, this is a bit of an advanced thing to deal with, but when we move all of the attributes inside a composition or we leave them somewhere else, we're basically deciding where certain information is going to live. And in this case, because we're grabbing multiple objects together, we only get to choose the second option. And that's kind of what's going on. Oh, so good to see, Patricia. So good to see it hanging out here in the daytime. I know you got stuff going on, so I really appreciate you coming and hanging out. So let's go ahead and change this comp a little bit. Okay, it doesn't need to be this big. This is too big. So I'm going to change its composition settings, what you can do is this little twirl down here, or you can go here to obvious logo. You can go into its composition settings, right? So here we go. We're going to change the width and height to be simply 540 by 540 because it doesn't need to be so big. I'm going to hit OK. Then I'm going to grab all these layers, drag them down, center them up in here, because if I want to animate this later, if I want to do something interesting with this later, I want this to stay organized as well. And this should be enough canvas space for me to do that. Okay, so I'm going to close out of this. Then we go back here. Wouldn't you know it, this thing is shifted around because I modified what was inside that comp. That means that now, since that comp itself has changed relative to this space, it's moved around. So I'm just gonna move that back up. Now, in terms of maintaining the verisimilitude or maintaining the original design, we've kind of had to throw that idea out a little. And that is because we are moving into a different frame size. In fact, this blue mountain comp here, we need to change its frame size as well. We're going to eventually be pushing this out as a 16 by 9, 1920 by 1080 HD image. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, go down here to composition settings on the blue mountains, and let's just type in 1920 by 1080. You can see that it updates in real time up here, and that looks fabulous, I guess. Needs a little bit of work, still needs a bit of work. What kind of work are we going to do with it? Let's find out. Okay. We want to position everything so that it looks good, it looks correct. Okay. And we have to move these around a little bit in 3 dimensions. If you want to add some interesting depth, if you want to add what we call parallax, then we want to make use of the 3D-ness of layers here in After Effects. Now we do this by clicking this little 3D switch on all of the layers. And you will notice that now all of the layers have a little 3D gizmo on them. If you're using the public beta, your gizmo will look a little bit different. But we're keeping it classic today because this is getting started. We don't want to scandalize anyone with the updates to the gizmo. But these are 3D. Now we need to observe them through a 3D camera. So I'm going to go right-click, New Camera. Now, there are a lot of choices when it comes to camera. I'm just going to go to the preset. I'm going to drop it down to 50 millimeter. This is going to behave like a regular 50 millimeter camera. There's one right over there on my desk. I'm not going to pick it up because I don't want to jostle things on my desk. But just like a regular 50 millimeter camera, it's going to behave in the same way. But you can dial in all kinds of camera attributes if you would like. One thing I'm going to do here is make sure that depth of field is off. So unlike a real camera, we are going to have this virtual, no depth of field. Everything's totally fine. This is going to save us a little bit of render time. And it's not going to look as pretty, but that's fine. This is all vector graphics. This is good. So I'm going to hit OK, and now we've created a camera. So we are now looking through the camera. I want you to remember that we are now observing this scene through that camera. Okay. Now, we know that because here we have active camera selected. Okay. Yeah. Tim, it's great that they still have 2 giant film cans on the camera icon. It's an interesting choice. I don't know. This is like the telephone icon question. Anyway. So now what I want to do, like, who's ever even seen regular like, yeah, anyway, regular stuff like that. Okay, so we're looking through the active camera because there's only the one camera. We could say specifically, let's look through camera 1, right? But we have these other views we might observe as well. So let's just keep looking through the active camera. And I'm going to go up here to my camera controls. Now, there are a few camera controls. I'm going to go to the track XY, and I'm going to hold down Shift as I track up. So I'm clicking and dragging down, trying to reframe this stuff a little bit for myself. Now everything is 3D, so if I were to push the camera forward or backward here, whoa, we can move forward and backwards towards and away from stuff if we wish, and that's exactly what we will be doing in here. All right. I love Pinsky's optimism. Anything you can see, you can do it in XD as well. I love a good parallax in web. So, okay. So now what we need to do, we've got our shot a little bit framed up. we need to start moving things forward and backward to try to make this kind of work for us a little bit. And there are two things that are important to remember. Things that are further away from us will not move as much, if at all, as we move around. And things that are further away from us tend to be out of focus a little bit, or they tend to have less detail than things that are close to us. Now, it's interesting that the artist has already gone through and is showing depth already through their composition. So these things closest to us are more vibrant, and the mountains in the back are less vibrant. They're blending into the background even more. So what I'm going to do, though, to make this a little bit easier for us, I'm going to take our stars and our sky back here, and I'm not going to, those don't need to be three-dimensional. I'm just going to remove that 3D-ness from them entirely. Because even if you're moving around, it doesn't really seem like the sky is changing or the stars are changing that much as you move around in 3D, right? So because these are background elements, let's just let them be two-dimensional. I'm going to change their color here to be a dark green. I like to use dark green as background. And now we might just have to move them back into position. And the sky here, I'm going to just scale that up to take up more space, take up even more space. Like so. Oh, we can see a little bit of it poking down out at the bottom. We're going to fix that up real quick, where we are going to take our camera here, call up its position, and we are going to push forward just a little bit. There we go. So now we can't see it. We've hidden that little problem. So don't worry about that. And then also the stars up here, we might move them down. We might even scale them up a little bit, make the stars a little bit more prominent, because there isn't really a lot to them. Right? On day 2, we're going to come back and we're going to totally replace the stars with more interesting and dynamic stars. So that's a little tease for you. But how do we achieve this parallax feeling? How do we achieve the feeling of moving forwards and backwards in space? Okay, well, we are going to set ourselves up for success. We are going to use a little life hack here as well. We're going to create a new null object. Now, null objects are just little placeholders out in the world. They don't really have anything to them. They don't render anything. They don't have any images associated with them. They just hold data, and they are useful little tools for us to manipulate the world around. And here we go. I'm going to take this null object and I'm going to parent it to the camera. If you see right here, we have this parenting and link situation. Now, if you don't see that, you might need to toggle switches and modes down here, perhaps. I don't know what your interface looks like specifically, but hopefully you can see the parent and link situation here. Make sure your null is 3D. Now we're going to take this thing here, this pick whip. I'm going to hold down Shift as I pick whip and pick whip it to the camera. It looks like it's disappeared. It hasn't. It's fine. Don't worry. We'll see it in a moment. As I switch from having a single view, one view, to two views horizontally, so that I can enjoy not only this view of what the camera sees, but also this view over here, which has been set to custom view 2. You could set it to custom view 1, and you get to enjoy this angle of things. But I told you not to worry because the null wasn't going anywhere. Here it is, living exactly at the same coordinates as the camera. Wonderful. It's a great place for it to be. But it doesn't need to be locked there anymore. So I'm going to take this null. I'm going to remove its link with the camera. That's fine now. Good. This will just hang out here. And we're really just setting up our scene, right? So we're just setting it up. So here's what we're going to do. Let's do the trees. Yeah, everything needs to be set off in 3D space. So how are we going to achieve this? We can, as you can see, we can kind of see the scene from two different angles here. So I can grab this tree and move it towards the camera, as you can see. As you select things, if you hover over the gizmo, and we are going to, oh, Sammy, we're gonna get to what's the point. We're gonna get to what's the point. It's coming up. You gotta trust me. You gotta trust me on this journey. And so if we hover over this tree, you can see that this gizmo is hanging out, and my pointer goes from nothing to having the Z under it there, or Z. And so what we're going to do is you hover over the Z, and we are going to just drag that so it's only going to be moving on its Z axis towards the camera. Notice that it gets larger as it gets closer to the camera. So that's the thing that I wanted to kind of show off with this, is that closer to the camera, it's getting larger. And it's kind of moving out of the position and framing if we wanted to try to maintain this framing, the size and proportion of things. A little bit difficult, right? Because I would have to move this forward and then maybe scrunch it down, maybe scale it down a little bit with these scrunchy handles, and then move it over. You know, trying to maintain that's going to be difficult. So here's a little hack to make that easy. We put this null. The null lives at the same place. It lives at the same place here. These two live in the same space. Now, a little trick of the eye that you can do is I can take, let's say I take this tree and I parent it to that null object, right? So now the tree is stuck on the null. So check this out. I now take the null and I'm going to scale it. So I'm scaling the null, and the null lives on top of the camera. As I'm scaling the null, you can see that this tree here in this view is getting closer and further from the camera, right? But in this view, you can see that nothing is changing because everything is happening in proportion. Because we are scaling to the camera, this appears to not change at all. However, in real 3D, or as Sunny points out, 2.5D space, I mean, it has X, Y, Z coordinates. But anyway, we'll get into that. That we are able to move this thing around relative to the things, right? So hopefully that makes sense as to why we would use this null to move things around. So now I can kind of move this tree forward. Okay, let's move that tree to there. Okay, and then let's see. We want to disconnect the two, reset this thing, and then we could get trees B, C, D, and E going. Let's get those moving around, right? So let's try to bring those closer to the camera as well. So let's parent them all to the null, okay? And I like to think of this as moving around and sort of we're dropping the trees off at school here. So what we want to do is let's find a position for B, right? We're going to scale it in a little bit and maybe like here. And now tree B, you can get off the bus now. So now we set that to none. And then we start pushing the trees. We're pushing the trees back a little bit like this. All right, well, tree C, you can get off the bus now. Then it gets off the bus. And then this one here, it's going to move back in the frame a little bit. Okay, well, you know, maybe around here. And then, or maybe even want to confuse things a little bit. No, this is probably going to be fine. We're going to go there. And then this one can get off the bus. And then finally, this one here is going to move back. And we might have just left that one at 0. That might have been just fine. And then it can get off the bus. Just like that. Just like that. So there you go. We've now got our trees that have been moved around, and they've all gotten off the bus at their respective places. Their framing has not changed at all. So if I take the camera and I push it forward and backward in the scene, you can see that parallax happening. You can see that parallax happening with the trees as they seem to move in relation to each other because we've dropped them off at different points. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, hopefully people are enjoying these chill Bob Ross vibes going on around here. Now, the reason why we often call the After Effects environment a 2.5D environment is because these things are flat. These do not have depth. These elements do not have depth. However, we can actually extrude them if we use the Cinema 4D extruding capabilities found in the different renderer options. Ooh, that's for another day. That's for another day. For now, let's continue on with our journey and push the mountains back. So we've done the trees. I think we did a great job with the trees. I want to congratulate you all for doing so well with those. I'm just going to lock them down. And I'm going to go ahead and, keeping the scale open here, now the mountains, we're going to repeat the process. Remember what we did. We made sure that the null lived at the same place as the camera. The mountains, we are going to make sure these are all 3D. Yes, we're going to parent them to that null. We're parenting them to the null. And now the null is going to be growing to push the mountains away, pushing the mountains away. And it may become difficult for us to see how far away they're going, because these really need to go. They gotta get out of here, because relative to the trees, they need to be very, very far out. Okay, so far out, man. So let's see. Let's start off at, say, 200. Okay, maybe this will be far enough for the trees. And remember, you can always go to your camera and do a little parallax test and see if that's feeling correct. It seems to feel correct for me, so let's go with that, right? Okay, so now let's continue on. Let's continue on pushing this null, scaling that null. So we're going to drop off Mountain A. Mountain A is going to get off the bus. Goodbye. Thanks for taking a ride. We're going to increase here. I don't know how much we're going to increase, but we'll go for a ways. And let's say we've got 4 mountains to go through, right? So let's go to 300 maybe. Oh yeah, we're really pushing it back there. And let's just say now's a good time for mist to get off. Oh, you know what? 300 is too much. We're gonna go to 250. We're gonna let the mist get off the bus. Goodbye. Thanks for taking the journey. And then we're gonna go to 300, and then Mountain B, they're gonna get off the bus. Goodbye. Thank you for taking the ride with us. We're going to keep going. Let's go to 350. It's getting even larger now. Mist B, they're going to get off the bus. And then we're going to go here to 400. Mountain C gets off the bus. Goodbye. Thank you. And then we're going to increase here to 500. 500 way in the background. Mountain D off the bus. Goodbye. The composition hasn't changed. We've completed our mission of getting this mountain scene to still look very similar. Composition's very similar. And we haven't had to do so much work, right? That's so wonderful. I just to refer to full disclosure, I watched a lot of Bob Ross when I was a kid. Parents would plomp us down in front of the PBS station, watch The Joy of Painting, really just lower everybody's blood pressure in the room, and it worked out perfectly. So now we're going to return to one view. We're going to return to this view, and we are going to push the camera through the scene a little bit. Now, we're going to see how well of a job we did, how good we did. Oh, and Sunny, you're saying you see people holding Shift and parenting with the null. Why do we do that? When you hold Shift and parent, it brings the child to the parent. Okay, so that's pretty critical. When we do these things, if you parent one thing to another while holding Shift, the child will move to be with the parent. It'll come and grab its hand. You could think of it like that, like the kid got scared at the mall and then it's going to run to its parent, right? So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so this null we don't really need to access so much, but let's test out a little camera move and see if we enjoy it. All right. So hit my position here. And the position we are just going to push forward. Oh, isn't that fun? Isn't that lovely as we push forward like so? And we could pull back if you want to pull back with this thing. Now, you'll notice that here underneath here, that's no good at all, right? That is not great. If we move back, we don't have enough mountain to really cover that space, right? Well, here's a great thing, and I tend to create problems just so I can show you how I solve them, right? And let's say that we need to adjust this asset here, right? Now, you can at any point, if you want to modify this, go Command E, and hitting Command E is going to allow you to or Control E will bring up the ability to edit the original objects in here. Bit of a word of warning before we get into this. This can have unintended consequences. Okay, so what we're going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to add some extra points to this. We're adding some points because we needed to extend this down a little bit. We need to extend it down, but notice things about this are changing as I do that. So I'm going to go Control Z, so you can see, or Command Z, and see what that was changing. So remember, as you start making modifications here, things are changing. So that this might be a way that you try to solve this little problem. And then we're going to hit Save. So we've saved this. We move back into here. It's going to take a moment. It's going to think hard. Then it's going to reload, and things have changed, right? Because we changed the asset, and now this layer has changed as well. So that's not really very useful to us if it's going to disrupt our compositions. So I'm just going to undo. I'm going to save. This will revert back to how it was before. Oh, thank you so much for reverting. Render, 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 revert. Good, great. Okay. How might we fill in that space then? How could we fill in that area? Well, we can always create some more things. There were a couple of ideas bandied about using some effects to extend this situation. For example, we could use the motion tile effect. So I'm going to go here into the effects and presets zone. I'm going to grab the motion tile. I'm going to drag it out onto Mountain A. So Mountain A is going to have a little effect that lives on it. This is my effects control, and I'm just going to alter the output height here. The output height is getting stranger now, right? So we're gonna increase that output height of this tile. We're going to mirror the edges. And as you can see, we get this little mirroring down there. Now, we talked a little bit about why this is sometimes hazardous or strange, because right now we've got a little artifact down here and it doesn't make a lot of sense. So the motion tile has let us down. How dare you, motion tile? How dare you? Here's an idea. Here's something that we could also do. And I think this is perfectly good. Okay, here we go. Here comes another idea. We can create a solid that will just live down there and help fill in the space. Just fill in the space a little bit. So I'm going to right click. I'm going to go new, and I'm going to go solid. It's going to be a white solid. It's going to be 1920 by 1080. We are actually going to make it, it needs to be like a longer band, a longer strip. So I'm going to go 1920 times 2, so it's going to be quite a bit longer. And it doesn't need to be as tall. It can be 540 tall. So we're going to go, okay. So I've got this cool block. So far, so good. I'm going to make it 3D. And there was a question earlier about why do we hold down Shift, right? Why are we holding down Shift here? So I've made it 3D. So now I can kind of move it around in three-dimensional space. I'm going to hold down Shift as I parent it to Mountain A. Snap. So what's happened is it's moved its position to be right on top of Mountain A, which means in three-dimensional terms, that's where it lives, on top of Mountain A. Great. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to position it just down here in this area. And I'm going to apply an effect to it, a fill effect. So I'm going to drop that fill effect on it. I'm going to use this eyedropper to select very close there. And then we're just going to move this thing back up, and it is pretty seamless. Pretty seamless here. And now if we want to use our camera to pull back a little bit more, we've got more runway to explore, right? At least until you hit the bottom of that tree, and then there's a whole other can of worms to deal with. So yes, that'll do it. That'll do it for my little solid hack here. Okay, we're together for another little bit of time. So let's go through and add those little details in here that are going to help fill out this scene. Let's get this camera into motion. Let's set some keyframes out here. Okay, I'll take a drink of water while I gather my thoughts. So we want to move the camera. So we're going to move back here to the start. I'm going to set a keyframe here on the position that's been open this whole time. It's been just hanging out. And then let's move ahead to maybe 5 seconds. Let's move ahead to maybe 5 seconds. And I'm just going to scrub on this value here. I'm just going to click and drag, moving myself forward here a little bit like so, until we reach kind of close to the original framing. And now we can play back and see if we enjoy that. It's fairly, so far so good, pretty enjoyable. Oh, a clunk. Oh, what was that hard clunk at the end? Oh, that's no good. So here at this hard stop, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to ease this. Now you can ease this by doing a few things. We can go keyframe assistant, easy ease by right clicking. You can hit F9. You can go through the menus up here if you wish. So we're going to do that. We are going to easy ease this down, and you know it's eased because it has this wonderful hourglass shape. That's how you know it's chill, I suppose. So we're linear at the start, and then we come into being eased at the end, which is perfectly fine, I suppose. Now, here's a little bit. I'm going to go, look, I want you to trust me as we do something a little bit dangerous. We're gonna access the graph editor. I'm gonna show you a little bit of the matrix now. We're gonna click this button here. This takes us into the graph editor. Now, this is mapping the acceleration of the layer over time. I know we're getting a little bit mathy. It's a little bit weird, but we are currently looking at a speed graph. Okay, so we're graphing the speed that this changes over time. As you can see, it reaches the speed of 0 down here. Now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to grab this handle. This is going to be fine. I'm going to pull the handle like this so that instead of coming down, smash, instead of coming down and hitting the 0, it's going to cruise into it. It's going to cruise into hitting 0. So we're going to go like this. Ah, what a nice easy ski slope down. Whee! It's having a great time. So its speed is coming in fast and then slowing, gradual slowing, just like that. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense with why we would pull this handle, why we would access the speed graph at all, right? Now, if you don't want to do that, there are other plugins that take over this kind of thing, but I recommend trying to get comfortable with this as quickly as possible. And here at the start, I'm going to pull its handle. I'm going to pull its handle a little bit like this so that it starts its life going quite a bit faster. So it's all a ski hill all the way down. Whee! Just like that. Okay. And remember, if your graph doesn't look like my graph, I'm looking at a speed graph right now instead of a value graph, which might look like this and be a little confusing. So let's just stick with the speed graph for today. That's enough graph editor. Sorry to make that happen, but we had to do it. I had to do it. There we go. Because now we have nice, eased, beautiful motion. That's what we all wanted, right? Now, in terms of continuing the motion, right? If we want this to keep sliding forward in an interesting way, there are a few ways to accomplish that. All right. And hopefully we can get there. Here's a great way that I like to do it. Remember this null? Remember our old buddy Nully back here? Well, if I go ahead and I parent the camera to that null, I can now move the null around and it'll drag the camera with it, right? Because now the null is in control. And so now if I keyframe the position of the null and I move ahead, let's move ahead to 10 seconds. And let's just move the null ahead a little bit. Let's just move it ahead a little bit. Push it through the trees. Why not? So it has linear motion happening to it, and we're combining the two. So the parent is moving and the child is moving, and together they make this wonderful, wonderful motion together that even when the child has stopped, the parent is still dragging it through the mall, and it's moving ahead in this nice calming way here at the end. So that's how we produce that motion of combining the motion of the child with the motion of its parent. Now, this might feel a little bit advanced. Don't worry. If that's not working out for you, I recommend sort of quickly understanding this parent-child relationship. If that's look, this is your first time setting keyframes, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. One thing I'm just going to say, you don't have to do that. We don't have to do it like that. You can always. Let's just undo. If you'd rather use maybe a more brute force approach to it, that we can just go ahead here to 10 seconds and we can push this position forward even more so that it all kind of happens off of the one driver here. Just remember that you are running into the floor. So at this keyframe, everything is stopped. Motion has stopped, and then it's going to pick up again. So you would have to go back into the graph editor, get this thing off the floor so that it continues its journey, right? So you would want to take this, set it to be linear perhaps, and then you would need to kind of fine tune this so that it lines up in a nice way. Or you can double click on a keyframe, go in here and make it continuous. Oh, I feel like we're adding too many layers of things already. Don't worry about it for today. These are tomorrow's problems. Okay. These are tomorrow's problems. For today, I want to continue on with a few other elements out here. Okay. Before we get too far away, we need some more trees. We got to fill in this scene. Okay. I feel like maybe just a couple more trees to the right and to the left would really bring this together, and it would hide our really nasty looking mountains here. So I'm going to go ahead, and these trees, let me just go ahead and take these trees. I'm going to make these yellow maybe, and these two trees up here, let's make them orange so that we can keep them together, right? And I'm just going to take one of these trees over here. Let's say tree E, right? I'm going to duplicate that by holding Command, hitting D, or you can do Control D. I'm just going to move this tree over here, and I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, and I'm just going to take up a little bit of space with that tree, and it's going to live right there. If I want that tree to live there, that's totally fine, and that's where it's going to be. Okay, good. I've made a little bit more tree. I've filled in the forest a bit. Well, how about one for the other side, huh? How about tree C? I duplicate that, move it over here, and make it a little bit bigger, maybe like this. Wonderful, wonderful. And if we would like to say have some more trees that are closer to the camera, you want some dark trees closer to the camera? Well, hey, let's go ahead and let's duplicate, say, tree A here. Let's move it over to the other side. Let's move it closer to the camera. Let's make it a little bit bigger. There we go. Now we're filling in a forest. Now we are filling it all in. Whoosh, right? So now we're moving through these, what are these, like jack pines maybe? And the reason that I'm kind of taking them from one side to the other is so that their silhouettes don't sort of look like duplicates. Again, we're dragging it towards the camera, making it a little bit larger, taking up this space, filling things in as we think it needs, making it feel organic. There we go. And we're kind of coming through this tunnel of trees, like a hydro corridor probably. There we go. Now we've got that going. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that wonderful that we're moving in like this, right? These trees here are maybe getting lost in a little bit of the mist. So how about that? Now we filled in a bit of the space, right? Now the idea is that we want to be filling in as much of the scene as we can so that the eye is kind of directed towards the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring this mountains thing down a little bit to be right here so that the framing makes a little bit more sense in keeping with this stuff that we're doing. Now, let's see. What else needs to be in motion in this space, right? If we're creating a scene, we want this to feel a little bit alive. So we have these mist layers, these little misty layers down here. Let's go ahead and just make those, I don't know, fuchsia perhaps. No, we're already using fuchsia for the null. Let's go ahead and use cyan maybe? Red. Let's just go with red. Okay. So we have these misty layers out here. Ooh, very, very ethereal, very fun. Well, what I think we should do is set them in motion, all right? So let's go with Mist B over here. Let's hit P to call up its position. And I'm going to set a keyframe. I'm going to grab the X arrow here and just drag it away. Goodbye. It was nice to see you, but now you must go. So we're just going to move it over here. And we're going to move ahead to 10 seconds. Grab that thing and move it over the other way. We're setting a keyframe because that's what we did when we initially hit our stopwatch here to set that keyframe. Whoosh. And now as we move forward, we can see that fog bank rolling across. There it goes. Wonderful fog, all created in Illustrator, and we're just translating it across here. Now tomorrow, again, I always like to tease what we'll be doing tomorrow. We'll be creating generated fog tomorrow. So we're going to replace the fog with something else. That's fine. Well, if there's fog back there, why isn't there fog up here? Look, I don't want to be critical of the original artist, but I feel like we need to have fog up here. So I'm going to take Mist B. I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to move it in the layer stack above Mountain A. Hit P to call the positions, or you can hit the U key to call up anything you've put a keyframe on. I'm going to select the position. So when I click on the position, notice both those keyframes go blue. So click on the position, both the keyframes have gone blue. Not that they're cussing or anything, but they've gone blue. And with them both selected, I'm able to modify them both at the same time. which is fantastic for me because I want to drag this in front of mountain A. Now, what I'm going to do, because they're both selected and my playhead is on top of one of the keyframes, that's important too. I can now grab the Z arrow here and pull it forward, pulling it forward. And as you can see, as we pop through this mountain, oh boy, and now we're going to, it's still coming forward. Pop, it pops through that mountain, wonderful. And we'll just move it forward like so. Now, we may wish to think about how far and how fast this stuff really needs to be going. So let's just move that ahead a little bit like that. Maybe cause a little bit of variety like so. And as you move it closer to us, you can see a little problem with this artwork. I'm sure you can see the problem. What's the problem here? This strange little situation. In fact, you can see it happening around all of them. Now that is because of how things in Illustrator work versus how things in After Effects work. Now, if we want this to be a little bit nicer, a little bit cleaner, you can toggle here. You see this this little switch right here that I'm going to toggle on and off. So just bear with me while I hit this here. All right. As I hit this little button here, the little collapse transformation, continue rasterization, notice that the fog gets a little bit less chunkified, right? So that's pretty good. That's getting us closer. And in fact, if at any point any of this stuff looks a little bad, just go ahead and turn this on for all of them. And that might help you with the quality because it's going to give you that infinite scaling that we expect and want from vector layers, right? So I'm going to turn all that on. Now, we still have the issue of this hard little chunky edge. I don't like that. I don't like that. Thankfully, I'm just going to show you how we solved that in the example file, right? So let me just go in here into the example file, and I'll show you how we solve for that little problem, that little trouble that it gives us in here. There we are. So the way we solve that is with an effect called the simple choker effect. And that allows us to just eat in on the outside of a layer. Yum, yum, yum. Eat away, right? Chunkatized. Yes, it's a technical term. So using some effects to try to make this work. Okay, so let's go for that simple choker here. We're going to apply the simple choker to the layer, right? At first, nothing seems to be happening. That's because you simply need to start increasing this number a little bit. And as you can see, if you increase it too much, we eat away more of the outside than maybe we want to. But it can be a little bit helpful. You just want to make sure that you're only eating away yum 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 as much as you need to make that line go away. And once we've done it perfectly once, we can copy that and paste it to the other buddies. And as you can see, it's cleaned up that little problem, right? So another thing that I'm going to recommend you do, you'll notice that these two look too similar. They look too similar. And tomorrow we're going to improve that with some generative effects. But for today, if you want to just work with the layers you've got, just think about flipping, rotating, and moving things around. So we can go layer, transform, flip it horizontally. That did it for me. That's variety enough. You know, we're able to create more variety out of what we have on hand. Now, if you want to modify keyframes without going into the keyframes and touching them and moving them around, if you've got your motion paths turned on, if you are observing the motion paths of these things, then you can just grab them out here and you can alter the keyframes visually out here, which is wonderful. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's see. Do we need another bunch of mist? I think we do. So let's get mist B. No, let's go mist A. Call up its position. Let's duplicate it, creating mist A2, which I'm going to send back. Send it back. So I'm just going to move it a little bit up, and now I'm going to grab its Z position, and I'm going to send it away. Goodbye. Oh, it's going away like Brigadoon. There we go. Go away into the background. There we go. And we might just make this go horizontally a little bit. And then Mist A needs some changes to its position as well. So Mist A and Mist A2. So let's see, what are some good positions for these to go from? We know we want all the fog to be rolling in the same direction. So let's start it all off a little bit over here. Mist A2, let's drag it a little bit over here. Make sure you're setting keyframes, turning on the stopwatch. Wonderful, wonderful. And we're going to move ahead because everything seems to be happening at 10 seconds. That's when the party is coming to an abrupt end. So we're going to grab this mist and move it along so that it whoosh, kind of goes and hides behind these trees. Goodbye. And then we're going to grab this one here and it starts to reveal itself above those mountains. Hello. And there we go. Now we can sit back and enjoy the fruit of our labors here. So hopefully that is good and nice for us. We do have plans to do even more. And let's see if we have time to talk about this logo animation, because the logo animation, I think, is something that is very interesting and good and adds a little bit of variety, a little bit of, with all of this slow moving nature stuff going in here and animating this obvious logo, I think will be nice for us. So with these vector layers, another thing that I think is important to talk about is that we can convert them here into path information. So, for example, this piece here, I can right-click on it, and I can go Create, and I can say Create Shapes from Vector Layer. This will make a duplicate of that thing. It's going to call it Bottom Line Outlines. And then what we're going to get into here, I'm just going to go ahead, twirl down. Oh, you know what I should have done? I should have turned off my notifications so my computer doesn't bother me with notifications. Now, we're going to go into the contents, twirl down, twirl into group 1, grab this path, twirl down into this path, this wonderful path here, and I'm going to just keyframe the path's movement, right? So we're going to go here, grab here, and I'm just going to set different phases of this path. So I know that it needs to return to this size, so I'm just going to pull this keyframe into the future. I don't know, maybe at 12 frames, right? Then back in the past, though, I'm going to grab these points, pull them into the middle, grab these points, pull them into the, oh no, make sure you grab all the points, and pull them into the middle. There we go. Pulling them into the middle like so. Now, you see I've done a very bad job of kind of lining this up, so it kind of looks bizarre when that happens. Let me try that again. So we're going to go back. Remember, we're going to grab these points, holding down Shift this time as we drag them into the middle. Same thing over here. We're going to grab these, holding down Shift as we drag them into the middle. So we start dragging, hold down Shift, pull them in. There we go. So yeah, this is now going to expand like so. Yeah. Whoop. So it's kind of moving apart like that. So now we can grab these. Let's ease that keyframe. Let's do the same trick we did before. Let's have a little refresher on that graph editor. Why not? We can go into the graph editor. We're looking at a speed graph. We pull the handle of the thing that's in the front, and that's going to give us this nice explosive and then calming, like so. We might even pull this off into the future a little bit so that we start with nothing, and then it expands outward. Now, of course, that's not the only way to bring things on. We need to bring on the little moon up here, and I think the mountain ridge as well. So we've got the moon, we've got the triangles. Let's move these things around. Okay, so as this thing expands, it's going to leave a moment for these to move up. So I'm going to hit P, set some keyframes for the positions of those. Let's see. And then we know sometime in the future, maybe around 3 seconds, these should both have resolved themselves. And so we'll go back here in time, and we're going to drag them below the line. We're just going to drag them down there. We're going to drag them down. I don't think you should drag anybody down, but we're going to drag these things down below the line like so. And again, we're going to do the same thing, that we are going to ease these, grab these, hitting F9. We are going to go into the graph editor. We're going to drag their handles like so. All right. And they're going to just drift up. I think the mountains should come up first. We're getting a little bit abstract now, but the mountains are going to come up first. So it's going to be line, mountains, moon. Okay, good. But certainly, you know what, let's just not look at the words for now. Certainly, we need to see these get revealed somehow, reveal themselves, right? So how can we do that? Well, there's a few ways. One of my favorite ways is to make use of something called the set mat effect. Now, we can use track mats, we can use masks, we can move all sorts of things. So let's observe some of those functions because we're only here for another 10 minutes. So I can make a new solid, make it the comp size, okay. I'm going to drag this solid down here so it's at the line. And this solid is going to live above the triangles, but I'm not going to look at it. I'm only interested in using the information of where that is. So now with the triangles, I'm going to say track mat. Look at the track mat of that alpha mat that's above me. And now it's only visible where this rectangle is. So maybe give me the alpha inverted. What do you think of that? Isn't that a cool, fun thing? We could then duplicate that process and use it for the moon, right? That could be fun. So let's try that. Let's duplicate this and do the same thing for the moon. So the moon will look alpha inverted at a duplicate of that layer. And so the moon is coming up. But wouldn't it make more sense if simply the moon came up from behind the mountains? Oh, how are we going to do this? Well, we talked about parenting. So this is now going to be parented to the triangles. So this solid will move as the triangles move. Okay, I'm with you so far. I'm going to move this up so that it's at the same space. It's at least at the same area as the triangles. And now it needs to be the same kind of shape as the triangles, roughly. So I'm going to take my mask. On this white solid, I'm going to draw a little mask over the whole situation. I'm going to make sure that I close my mask out like so. There we are. And so now, revealing. Oh, look at this. Look at this. And that is made possible because this happens to have a very mountainy shape to it. It is parented to the triangles, right? But it is controlling the moon. This is a little bit more complicated, I think, than most folks may want to get into. If this is your first outing, you may want to watch this part over again. We just kind of ran out of a little bit of time here, and we can definitely go over it again tomorrow if that's something that people are into, because we can definitely get a little bit deeper with that. Something else you can do, though, if you just want this to reveal a little bit more simply, we don't have to go crazy with stuff. You can just keyframe the opacity of something to go from 0 and then bring that up. That can be just a nice, relaxing way to bring things on. So then you can see mountains. I want to see mountains, Gandalf. And then we might ease these as well. So mountains. See how that's working. Mountains, yes. Now, everything we've done in here, let's return to the main composition. And as you can see, here it is resolving mountains. So let's drag that ahead a little bit so that it happens as we've kind of cleared the trees, and then it comes up. Now, someone was mentioning that things look a little bit laggy. Well, that's because this needs to render and cache all of these things, right? Then we could do all kinds of interesting things once this is all cached up, and we can play it back and it can look nice. So we can enjoy that. But just remember, as you start adding more things, we get when you get frustrated with the playback, just remember that it has to store these frames somewhere. And we have heaps of layers, heaps of them in here doing interesting calculations all the time. So just remember that as the bar goes green, that's going to be going well. Anyway. Umacore, talk about track mats. Oh, man. Masks are good. So we can achieve the same thing several ways, right? We can achieve the hiding and revealing of this. We can use masks. We can use mats. We can use the set mat effect. We could be using stencil alpha layer modes. We're doing so many things. We could be doing so many ways. There are many ways to reveal a layer with another layer. And there are so many ways because After Effects is primarily a compositor, right? So hopefully that kind of makes sense as we come in here to kind of the end of day one. Reaver Mike is asking, you use the eyeballs way more than the parenting. Why don't I reverse their position? Oh, that's a good question, because you can customize your interface however you like. One of the reasons, Mike, that I do not move them around is because this is the default way that the interface appears to people. And when I am doing things like this, I want to make sure that my interface looks like everyone else's interface so that they can kind of find the things that I'm indicating. The other reason is that I've worked with everything in this format for over a decade. And so it is ingrained in me that the eyeball lives here and the parenting lives here. Personally, in most projects, I'm using parenting more than I'm using eyeballs. So today may be different, but I don't know. It's tough to say. Tough to say what your order of operations, what your first order retrieval is for your tools. But you can customize a lot of things about the interface to your liking. But yeah, so we have so we've kind of come into the end of things. I want to give you a little preview about what's up on day 2. Day 2, we are going to dip into some more interesting things. We are going to redo the fog. We are going to do fog that I think is going to be more appealing. So we're going to create fog banks that are more, let's see, let me just have a look at the fog in the mountains. So we're going to make some fog. We're going to make some generative fog here that isn't just copied Illustrator layers, which is cool, but we are going to make this using generative techniques inside of After Effects so that we can have abstract fog, if you'd like some abstract fog. We could have wispy fog. Ooh, it's like a stream of ghosts. Or if you want, we can have abstract yet wispy fog that looks kind of like bacon. I'm not really sure yet, but mostly we'll be dealing with these two forms of fog tomorrow. So I don't know why I made the bacon fog. I guess I was having a silly morning. But we're going to dip into those kinds of techniques tomorrow. Tomorrow we will also be looking at a way to make stars in the sky. I think it's important. These stars that we originally started with, they don't do anything. They just kind of stand there, right? So they're just kind of there. Well, instead we're going to replace them with a twinkling night sky that is returning into early morning. So there you go. We're gonna have some twinkling stars tomorrow. We're going to take care of that. We are also going to go in here to one of these trees. Oh boy, I know I'm running out of time, but we are also going to animate the trees. We're going to get those moving around in an interesting way using the puppet pin tool so that we can enjoy them swaying in the breeze, as you can kind of see. So hopefully that makes sense with what we're going to be doing tomorrow as we come into the end of the day here. I hope that you have all enjoyed hanging out for this kind of beginner getting started in After Effects stuff. And hopefully that is great. And Sean is asking one final question of the day. What is Canadian bacon in Canada? I think we call it pea meal or back bacon, but people do not eat it. That is not a food that people consume very much up here. It is weird. Anyway. Hopefully this has been good. Hopefully you've learned a lot about After Effects. Hopefully you've learned a little bit about bringing your artwork from Illustrator into After Effects. I want to thank you all for coming out and hanging out and for spending time with me this morning. Like I said, we have a rich full day of activities coming up here on the show. So Adobe Live continues with even more great things, daily creative challenges. You're going to learn about fresco coming up to make artwork. You're going to learn about hand lettering in Illustrator. Definitely check that out. Oh my goodness. And then you could animate it in After Effects. Oh, you could make hand lettering and then you could do something with it. So thank you again so much for coming out. I'm going to take off because we're coming into the end of my time here. If you want to find me on the internet, I'm at EC Abrams all over the place. And, I'm going to be Sarah says I'm going out for a rip. I do not smoke, so and no one else should smoke either. Actually, a rip is usually a fast drive, I believe. You've correctly guessed it. I am from Southern Ontario, so there you go. Anyway, we call prosciutto reverb mic. Anyway, so that's it for me. Bye for now. I'm going to play the outro, and we'll see you next time.